This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Chinese State Council and Foreign Minister Wang Yi heads to Algeria after concluding his visit to Egypt. African countries step up efforts to contain a steep rise of COVID-19 infections caused by the Delta variant. And we look at preparations by Muslims to mark Eid al-Adha amid the coronavirus pandemic. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers, and here with the latest in business is Uche.
Thank you, Hannah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Major oil producers agree to boost output to meet a rising global demand. And tourism players in Kenya express optimism of a rebound after pandemic slows visitor arrivals. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Hannah.
Thank you so much for all that, Uche. Well, Chinese State Council and Foreign Minister Wang Yi is heading to Algeria after concluding a 3-day visit to Egypt. Wang met with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Egyptian Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry. His talks focused on boosting cooperation between Egypt and China in all fields. Adel Emrohi has more.
Wang Yi concluded a 3-day visit to Egypt's New Alamein city on Monday. There, he met with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi to discuss developing ties between the two nations. This year, Egypt and China are celebrating the 65th anniversary of the establishment of their diplomatic ties.
I appreciate the comprehensive strategic partnership between us, which participated in providing qualitative transformation and a leap between us in all fields, especially during the past 7 years. We look forward to more support from China, our friendly nation, to Egypt's stance in the Grand Ethiopias Renaissance Dam, based on the existing strategic relations and the importance of the issue of Egypt's existence to reach a fair solution for all involved parties.
Egypt expressed its desire to open more opportunities to export agricultural products to China and increase Chinese foreign direct investments in Egypt. The talks tackled how both countries can help in establishing stability in the Middle East and counter terrorism. In that regard, Wang announced that Egypt will be a dialogue partner in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a body concerned with battling extremism.
We see Egypt as the most significant, comprehensive, strategic partner in the Arab world, the Islamic world, African and developing nations. We are very keen to develop our relations with Egypt. Our ties have yielded fruitful results, especially during COVID-19 pandemic. We've provided support in a spirit of one team, which formed a model for developing nations. Our cooperation in this field is a new significant step in our ties.
Wang Yi and the Egyptian Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry signed an agreement to establish a government cooperation committee to lead the development in relations both nations seek. The Chinese Foreign Minister's final meeting in New Alamein was with the Secretary General of the Arab League, Ahmed Abul Ghait. They discussed cooperation in regional conflicts, on top of which the Palestinian crisis. Wang Yi's visit solidifies the comprehensive strategic partnership between the two countries. Hosting it here in this Mediterranean city is yet another indication that Egypt is keen to include China in its mega national projects that would help in boosting its economy. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, New Alamein, Egypt.
Tunisia says it is facing its worst health crisis since the outbreak of COVID-19. The World Health Organization has expressed concern about an increase in coronavirus cases as countries across the region prepare to mark the Muslim Eid al-Adha holiday on Tuesday. The Tunisian government has banned intercity travel to prevent social gatherings where infections could spread. Reporting from Tunis, here's Adnan Shouashi.
The Tunisian Prime Minister has ordered the requisition of all private clinics in 9 governorates. The private health facilities will accommodate COVID-19 patients staying in public hospitals facing oxygen shortages. This measure will remain in force until the resumption of normal oxygen supply in the country.
We are facing an emergency, and the oxygen supply should not be interrupted at all hospitals. All patients should not worry about getting the necessary oxygen and care. We are willing to go get the oxygen by ourselves from the suppliers. Will not tolerate this oxygen supply breakdown anymore. It's unacceptable.
Hisham Mishishi also noted that a specialized team will supervise the installation of dozens of oxygen generators offered by foreign countries.
This is the second emergency meeting to evaluate the situation and the oxygen supply crisis. The health department did not anticipate the crisis or failed to manage the high demand. The oxygen generators will be operational as soon as possible. We are talking about human lives. There is no room for improvisation or any delay.
Some 43,000 vaccine doses were administered on Sunday, while the target of the health department is 100,000 inoculations per day. Health authorities aim to step up the vaccination campaign by creating new vaccination centers in the next few days.
I just got my second dose of the vaccine. I think all people must get vaccinated. They should not fear side effects. It's always better than facing the virus with a weak body. The infection spreads rapidly and the health system is collapsing. We will not resume a normal life without vaccination.
According to the National Institute of Statistics, the Muslim celebration of Eid al-Adha has been deeply affected this year, given the ongoing strict lockdown in Tunisia. The Health and Trade Departments designated less than 50 spots for cattle markets, while there were more than 3,000 public and private spots before the outbreak of the pandemic last year. Last year, Tunisia had observed Eid al-Adha in normal conditions after controlling the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, this year, the government has not relaxed the lockdown measures due to an unprecedented surge in infections and deaths. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Let's move over to West Africa now, where the Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19 in Nigeria has put 6 states on red alert. This comes after reports of an increase in patients infected with the Delta variant in those states. CGTN's Wanja Mugai reports.
The Nigerian Presidential Steering Committee says the Delta variant of COVID-19 had been detected in the country early this month. The number of patients with the variant has now increased significantly. The government has subsequently issued a red alert in 6 states, namely Lagos, Oyo, Rivers, Kaduna, Kano, Plateau, and the Federal Capital Territory. It has also maintained restrictions on travelers from India, Brazil, Turkey, and South Africa.
For the new variants, we have already listed the black-red zones of country, which you mentioned 4 of them, 3 in the Europe and 1 in Africa, South Africa. These measures still in place. Anybody coming in, inbound, outbound passengers from these countries are quarantined straight. Your documents are screened, no negotiation at all, and your test for second day of arrival and 7 days must be done to certify you safe before you are released into the community.
The World Health Organization says the Delta variant is of high concern because it has increased transmissibility. Currently, the variant has been detected in over 100 countries. Medical experts in Nigeria say they have taken necessary steps to combat its spread.
We make sure that we step up our testing and accessibility, because access and turnaround time is key for us to have accurate data. And recently, there's even ongoing zero prevalence survey across the 12 states plus FCT, which FCT is still on. The survey is still on to ascertain the disease burden and the pattern of the disease and the level of antibody. That will help also to guide us on the issue of vaccines, issue of deploying our commodities and strategies and changing policies as it evolves.
Nigeria is believed to have administered 4 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine, translating to 1% of the country's population being vaccinated. With this, the Delta variant poses an increased and more severe threat to the country. Wanja Mugai, CGTN.
A doctor in Kenya has developed what could be the first reusable nano mask. It is arguably Africa's first mask and is made for real-time deactivation of infectious agents. CGTN's Nick Mudimba tells us more.
Talk about an invention at the right time, at the right season. This is a nano mask that protects you from bacterial infection, viral, and of course, fungal. It's an invention that has come in handy during this tough COVID-19 time and invented by none other than Dr. Nderito, who, of course, I want him to tell us more about the inspiration of coming up with this. Doc, good to see you. How are you doing?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much.
Yes. I'm Dr. Joseph Nderito, and I'm a human anatomist. I'm a medical doctor, and I'm a nanotechnology researcher. And I'm the one who came up with the Tira Nano Mask, which is the culmination of many years of work and interest in nanotechnology. In my primary interest was the development of products to reduce the problems of antimicrobial resistance in Africa. And so when COVID-19 struck, and I knew that I had technology at the back of my mind that could help deal with the problems that we were facing. So I thought that it would be a good thing to see whether a nano mask, a mask with the capacity to kill bacteria and viruses and all that, could be a better tool to deal with the issues of the pandemic than what we had. And from a lab point of view, it was clear that this is actually working as predicted, but I needed it verified by microbiological tests, right? And so when we tested the material I submitted the material to the National Microbiology Reference Laboratory, which is like the topmost level of microbiology test you can have. A reference laboratory is the top laboratory in any system.
And then we introduce the fabric into that food, we call it culture media, and see whether the bacteria will be killed by the nanoparticles that diffuses into the media. So basically that's what we did, and we got very, very good results. And these are fabrics that can be used in maybe hospital, a setup like the lab coats, the lab coats doctors, nurses, and lab technologists, scientists like me use. They can be used to make such coats.
So you say, what if there's a decay rate is 0.1%, 0.9%, 0.2%, and that is the reason why I have limited its wash cycle to 100 washes. So the mask would put the production cost for each mask at $5 a piece, which is from research and development, all the chemicals involved, the entire operation, that is before going to the factory, and then there is the amount that is the hours charged by the factory itself for the production process, including the stitching. So that would be about $5 a piece. So this fabric that apparently looks normal to people, it's the one that we're saying it's impregnated with the nanoparticles. The term impregnation is important here because in science that means it's not just coating, it's forcing the atoms to become permanently bonded with the chemical structure of the material.
Dr. Nderito now hopes to capitalize on the welcome move by Kenya's microbiology lab approval to come up with more inventions that will improve the quality of life. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Ethiopia says the second round of filling its Grand Renaissance Dam has been successfully completed. The country's Minister of Water, Irrigation and Energy, Seleshe Bekele, said that the dam will now contain enough water to soon begin the first phase of producing 740 megawatts of electricity.
I would like to congratulate all Ethiopians across the world. As you all know, we started the plan of filling this grand dam for the second time a few weeks back, and now, as you can see, that plan has successfully been completed. You can see water is flowing over the dam. We have saved enough water to start the first phase of the power generation. From day one, the dam's two bottom outlets have never stopped releasing water. They are still doing that, letting water reach the lower riparian nations. The reason for this is that this season water in the Nile Basin was higher than usual. Therefore, that has helped us to achieve the second filling of our dam.
Time for us to now take a short break and return. Celebration as England lifts all COVID-19 restrictions, but analysts warn of significant threats. And we'll look at preparations by Muslims to mark Eid al-Adha amid the coronavirus pandemic.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Well, millions of people across England are experiencing the first day without some COVID restrictions that have been in place for more than a year. Wearing masks on public transport, in stores and restaurants is no longer a legal requirement. Capacity limits in bars and restaurants, as well as rules limiting the number of people who can socialize, have also been lifted. But the so-called Freedom Day is being marred by surging infections, warnings of supermarket shortages, and Prime Minister Boris Johnson's forced self-isolation. Britain has the 7th highest death toll in the world at over 128,000 and is forecast to have more new infections each day than it did at the height of a second wave of the virus earlier this year. Well, at the stroke of midnight, nightclubs reopen in London for the first time in 16 months. Clubbers flocked to one of the first rule-free live music events since the outbreak. Nogutula Shabalala has that story.
It's been over a year since England imposed its restrictions to limit the spread of COVID-19. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has now lifted legal restrictions on social contact. In the early hours of July 19th, nightclubs reopened for the first time. Many were happy to be dancing and rejoiced in human interaction in what some have dubbed Freedom Day.
I want to dance, I want to hear live music, I want the vibe of being at a gig, being around people. I think I'm really excited for that. I feel like we've lost it. Yes, it feels like Freedom Day. It really, really does, yeah, to me.
Can you sum up your emotions? Do they know she's going to a concert?
I mean, I'm so excited, and I know that obviously... I know that the rate is going up, but people say that it's not a big deal because it's young people that are getting infected and it wouldn't be a serious thing. They're not going to die from it. So it feels okay for us to do it in a way.
Promoters of the event are still cautious of the spread of COVID-19. They reduce the number of bands and the number of venues.
The want is there, most definitely. I think people have severely been missing it. It's something that you can't replace with any other feeling.
I think that I've seen more and more people take caution than they did a month ago, and basically, apart from if it's the football, but at the same time, like where we've got to now, Freedom Day is not as let all your shackles go, but it still doesn't mean this stuff shouldn't happen.
British society appears split on the restrictions. Some want tough rules to continue, while others want them eased. For business owners, including those of nightclubs, travel companies, and in the hospitality industry, have been desperate to reopen the economy. Artists say the lockdown has been tough.
Before this, I had a bit of apprehension that I wasn't going to like it again because it's been so long. I'm like, maybe I have grown up, and maybe I'm actually not going to like performing that much anymore. And as soon as we stood on the stage and started sound checking, I was like, oh yeah, I do like this. It's like, I do love this. This is my passion. It's like, that's why I've been doing it for so many years, because it is a passion.
More than 68% of UK adults are fully vaccinated. The country has one of the world's highest death tolls from COVID-19. It is facing a new wave of cases, with more than 50,000 infections per day across the United Kingdom. Epidemiologists have been skeptical about the lifting of restrictions. Noktula Shabalala, CGTN.
Earlier, we spoke with Sharon Ffrench. She is a professor of public health at Wits University in South Africa. She shared her thoughts about England easing its restrictions.
I think all of us are trying to come to grips with what it means when we say we have to live with COVID-19. And I think you have to balance things. And the things you have to balance are you going to be able to break the link between getting ill and dying? And I think the vaccines have shown that we will. The other thing you have to balance is between life and livelihoods. So in the UK, in comparison to many other countries, they have a lot of social safety nets. And so they might well be in a position to decrease many of their restrictions. And it seems to me one thing we know about COVID is that ventilation is incredibly important. And so I could see some logic to keeping people's masks in inside spaces in poorly ventilated areas. But these are choices people have to make using data in their own countries. And so the question is, have we broken the link between death and getting ill? I think that is yes. Have we broken the link between getting ill and severe illness? I think the answer is yes. But there are a lot of unvaccinated people, and the question is, have we broken the link between them and getting severe diseases that might have lifelong consequences? Those are some of the questions we don't know. So some caution, I think, is required, but countries have to make their own choices. I can use the example of South Africa, which I know better. Here, the choice really is between life and livelihoods. We have to protect both. And unfortunately, with the level of unemployment that we have in this country, with the level of poverty that we have in the country, I think you have to be incredibly careful. And you make very different choices. More people, or as many people, or nearly as many people, might suffer severe long-term consequences from not having a job or not having food as they would from getting an infection. And so I think that the balance is very different. I think rich countries are in a position to make any choice they want, actually. They are very, very privileged to have that opportunity. I think there are very few countries who can follow that lead. So maybe in Europe they can, maybe in the US they can, but I don't think that that's a luxury open to the majority of people in most of the world. So clearly the obvious underlying factor is there are people who are still vulnerable, and so they're getting infected. The question is, what causes that vulnerability? Some of it, of course, is personal of the individual, but the other is the characteristic of the virus itself. And what we know and what we've demonstrated is the virus mutates. What drives that mutation? That mutation is driven by the spread of the virus among the unvaccinated. And you will know we have now moved on to alpha and beta and delta and so on. The delta virus is spreading hugely around the world. And so honestly, the most important thing is the underlying thing that was first said at the beginning of this pandemic. No one is safe until everyone is safe. And if vaccines are not rolled out across the world, everyone will still be vulnerable because there will be the scope for another variant and another variant to which current immunity might not protect you. So the answer is, let's start sharing scientific knowledge, scientific technology, and let's make sure the whole world gets access to the vaccine.
The annual Muslim pilgrimage of Hajj has begun in Saudi Arabia. For the second year running, the kingdom has drastically restricted who can attend amid attempts to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Reporting from Dubai, here's Jacob Greaves.
The Hajj pilgrimage is underway in Saudi Arabia, but at a limited capacity, with Riyadh taking the decision to prevent foreigners from attending. This year, it's only open to citizens and residents of the country. Even then, there's been further restrictions implemented to try and ensure the safety of pilgrims and prevent the spread of COVID-19 in the country. According to authorities, only people aged between 18 and 65 can attend. They also have to be vaccinated or immunised against the virus and be free of chronic illnesses. In total, the capacity for this has been set at a maximum of 60,000 people. That's more than the close to 1,000 worshippers permitted last year, but a lot less than in normal times. Saudi Arabia's health ministry has spoken of the concern of the potential spread of virus variants as a reason for imposing restrictions despite the relatively widespread vaccination drive in the country. It means once more the pilgrimage has a very different look and feel to normal. The kingdom is seen as the custodian of two of Islam's holiest sites. Before the pandemic, around 2.5 million pilgrims used to visit Mecca and Medina for the week-long Hajj, alongside the year-round Umrah pilgrimage. The capacity limitations and the restrictions on foreigners attending also carries economic significance, particularly to the local hospitality sector. In normal times, this all brings in around $12 billion to the kingdom. That figure, alongside the number of those in attendance, is set to be a lot lower this year. Jacob Greaves, CGTN in Dubai.
Well, as we heard in that report, Muslims around the world are to this week mark Eid al-Adha. For a look at how Egyptians are preparing for the festivities, here is Yasser Hakim.
Eid al-Adha comes from the word udhiyah, which means the sacrifice. That's when Muslims with the financial means would buy livestock, mainly sheep, cows or camels, and distribute its meat to the poor.
It's a religious tradition mentioned in the Holy Quran for those who can afford it and according to the Sharia law. It has a deep meaning that the well-off should always support the poor and not just on certain occasions. For instance, since the coronavirus pandemic started, more people are helping the poor and those affected by the coronavirus with increased charity work and more sacrifices than before.
Hani Kamil works on a farm. He says the highest season of the year is the Eid al-Adha.
The farm is operating all year round, but we have extensive production for the Eid al-Adha. We monitor the health of the livestock, the nutrition and well-being. We then bring the animals from our different farms over here, the closest place to Cairo, to sell and distribute them for the Eid al-Adha.
The sheep is the most sold due to its lower price than cows and camels. There are three types of lambs in the market. The Baladi or local city ones are the most in demand. There's the Barqi, which comes from the Bedouin villages, and the imported Sudanese livestock. Naturally, the Egyptian market has witnessed a slowdown since the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic.
It was affected by the pandemic issue, but there was a segment that made up for the drop in sales. Those are the people who could not travel for the annual pilgrimage due to the travel restrictions. They spent the pilgrimage money on buying more sheep and cows to distribute to the poor, and these helped push sales up again. The price of livestock increased this year because of the rise in animal feed prices. This happened in all farms, but not so much with us because we also produce animal feeds, so we managed to keep the prices down.
Islamic law stipulates the owner of the livestock is to distribute a third to the poor, a third to the relatives and friends, and a third to his household. The udhiyah, or the sacrificed lamb, should be distributed by the first day of Eid. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
In South Sudan, thousands of people are seeking safety in UN camps. They've been fleeing attacks in their villages in the southwestern parts of the country. The UN says it's investigating incidents of violence by armed groups there. Here's CGTN's Wanja Mugai with more.
Many families in Tambora neighborhood in South Sudan are in despair. Attackers have been wreaking havoc in the villages, burning houses, looting and reportedly killing people. The locals have been unable to cope and had to abandon their homes. Now they decry a threat to their lives and loss of livelihoods.
We are suffering with our children. There is no way to go to the farm and collect some food like cassava or its leaves. We really need peace, nothing more, only peace.
The violence in South Sudan is mainly conducted by rebel groups opposed to the government and at times community rivalry. Churches and schools have become their refuge, and while some are counting losses of their property, others are worried about the whereabouts of their relatives.
We have a number of persons still disappeared, and this is very, very concerning. IDPs are looking also for their husbands, for their fathers, for their sons, and they've gone missing. Apart from this human life that has been lost or disappeared, we have the material damage that is also very concerning.
The United Nations and other humanitarian organizations have been helping improve their living conditions, supplying them with foodstuff like grains and cooking oil.
We have been suffering, running from place to place without food. But today I'm grateful for the United Nations because they came to our rescue with some food items. I'm very happy.
The UN says so far 1.6 million Sudanese people have been displaced. Wanja Mungai, CGTN.
Well, here's a quick reminder of our top stories. Chinese State Council and Foreign Minister Wang Yi is heading to Algeria after concluding a 3-day trip to Egypt. Wang met with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Egyptian Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry. His talks focused on boosting cooperation between Egypt and China in all fields. Tunisia says it is facing its worst health crisis since the outbreak of COVID-19. The World Health Organization has expressed concern about an increase in coronavirus cases as countries across the region prepare to mark the Muslim Eid al-Adha holiday on Tuesday. The Tunisian government has banned intercity travel to prevent social gatherings, and millions of people across England are experiencing their first day without some COVID-19 restrictions that have been in place for more than a year. Wearing masks in public transport, in stores and restaurants is no longer a legal requirement. Capacity limits in bars and restaurants and rules limiting the number of people who can socialize have also been lifted. And that was our recap of our top stories. Well, Uche is here to bring us the latest in business.
Thank you, Hannah. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Major oil producers agree to boost output to meet a rising global demand. And tourism players in Kenya express optimism of a rebound after pandemic slows visitor arrivals.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, OPEC and major non-OPEC oil producers, known as OPEC Plus, have agreed to boost output by 400,000 barrels a day in order to meet increasing demand in the market. Meanwhile, they will also be phasing out the existing output cuts of 5.8 million barrels per day by next September. Well, last year, the OPEC Plus reduced production by a record 10 million barrels per day amid the coronavirus pandemic. The adjustment was already slowly reduced and currently stands at 5.8 million barrels. Meanwhile, tourism industry players in Kenya are optimistic about a rebound following the arrival of more than 300,000 international visitors in the first half of this year. Now, the sector suffered a devastating slump because of COVID-19, And the latest statistics from Kenya's Tourism Research Institute show that East Africa's biggest economy received about 305,635 international arrivals in the period between January and June. This is, however, just over 200,000 shy of the total arrival, which was recorded in the full year 2020. Now, during the 6 months reviewed by the state agency, the U.S. was Kenya's top source market, followed by Uganda and Tanzania. The fall in numbers pushed hoteliers and airlines in the country into losses, estimated at billions of shillings, as they scaled down operations for months due to a lack of traffic. It also hurt the earnings of the state-run Kenya Airports Authority, which runs the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport and other airfields in the country. Kenya, of course, suspended international flights in March 2020. That's after reporting the first case of COVID-19. And heading to Uganda now, the country's coffee exports have hit a record high of 6 million coffee bags, which is the highest total exports recorded in a single year in 3 decades. Now, the latest figures from the state-run Uganda Coffee Development Authority show the country earned close to $600 million in June 2021, and that's compared to about $485 million last year. Here's CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga reporting.
Uganda is beginning to see a payoff in coffee exports. The country's Coffee Development Agency recorded a 19% increase in exports in June this year. The rise in exports is attributed to the newly planted coffee trees, which have started to yield, supported by favorable weather.
The revenues from coffee has been largely from Robusta, because that's where we have had big increases. We have been, in this financial year, we've been in a fry crop.
Coffee promoters say the rise in prices at the global level have also encouraged exporters to release their stock. Much of Uganda's coffee is going to Europe, but the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions are slowing down the coffee trade. Uganda has been under lockdown for a month now, and transporting coffee out of the farm is now a challenge.
Most of the farmers are stuck with a lot of stock from the previous harvest, and that affects them because that is an entire chain. How are they going to pay all these workers? Because workers still have to harvest that coffee. Workers still have to do the entire thing. How are they going to pay them? Because even us that are buying coffee from them, the market demand is not something that we expected.
Uganda's target is to produce more than 20 million bags by 2035. The country's coffee agency is hopeful that it could see an increase in coffee exports, driven by the increasing global coffee prices because of a reduced harvest from Brazil and Vietnam, who are the top coffee producers. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And let's go to South Africa now. The country's Reserve Bank could hike interest rates as early as September. Now, the move is predicted to strike a blow to consumers who are already reeling from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and, of course, recent violent protests. Now, economists at BNP Paribas expect the Apex Bank to increase rates by 25 basis points in September and November, respectively. They're citing the effect of higher international oil and food prices on the inflation outlook. Now, the Reserve Bank has kept the key repo rate steady at 3.5%. This is after it slashed rates by an unprecedented 300 basis points last year in the face of the extraordinary economic meltdown, which was triggered by the pandemic and the lockdowns to contain it. And still in the country, manufacturing production declined in May for a second month in a row. According to Statistics South Africa, the sector was down 2.6% from April. The industry was showing steady growth since lockdown restrictions were eased last year. But with a severe third wave of COVID causing a rise in infections, activity has been limited. Now, rioting and looting in parts of the country is also expected to severely impact the manufacturing sector going forward. Here's Sumitra Naidu with the details.
The ongoing looting in South Africa's Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal provinces is a major setback for the economy. The manufacturing industry is the second largest employer in South Africa. It is already feeling the impacts of the rioting related to former President Jacob Zuma's jailing last week. A number of big factories and warehouses have been burned, machinery and equipment destroyed or stolen.
The manufacturing sector, as you rightly note, is a fundamentally important component of our economy. It's really the engine of growth for our economy. It employs a significant amount of people. Last quarterly labour force statistics, just over 1.5 million employees, contributes approximately 11% to our GDP.
Manufacturing is very important in the context of a country like ours, a developing economy with high levels of unemployment. Needs sectors like manufacturing because of the multiplier effect that manufacturing has on the different variables that are linked to manufacturing.
Petrol stations inland are running dry after a major oil refinery suspended operations this week. The demand for fuel is likely to push inflation up. Rising input costs are also likely to delay a full recovery in the manufacturing sector.
It will massively affect, as I said, supply chains. You have to move the goods to the market, and you also have to move the raw materials to the production base. So that is a major significant issue that at play now. We've also seen disruptions slightly coming in from the transport service business. Most of the trucks have now been kept on the bay because of the security concerns.
Meanwhile, COVID is still hampering efforts to ramp up production. Thousands are dying from the more severe Delta variant. The recent move to tougher lockdown restrictions will reverse some of the gains.
If you look at the year-on-year change, manufacturing was up by about 35.3% in May compared to May last year. So on a year-on-year basis, numbers were positive, although the outcome was slightly below our expectations. So we had expected 40% year-on-year, and Bloomberg Consensus had an expectation of 46% year-on-year.
According to Stats SA, 6 out of 10 subsectors under manufacturing showed growth in the first quarter of this year, suggesting a more positive outlook. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's take a look at China's economy now. The country's top economic planning body said Monday that China's GDP grew about 5.3% from January to June this year, and that's compared to the same period pre-pandemic in 2019. Now, the National Development and Reform Committee said that compared to the first half of 2020, as China emerged from the pandemic, the Chinese economy rebounded by 13% to top 53 trillion yuan, or $8 trillion US. Now, it also added that a strong comeback in the service industry drove the country's overall economic recovery. Meanwhile, China's top economic planner says that strong momentum in the services sector has helped to fuel the country's economic recovery during the first half of this year. The National Development and Reform Commission approved 40 new fixed asset investment projects during the first 6 months, primarily in fields such as transport, energy and information technology. Now, China's cross-border rail networks helped to maintain the trade momentum and offset the pandemic effect on the shipping industry to a large extent. For example, the China-Europe Express totaled over 7,000 freight trains in the first 6 months, and that was up 43% year on year. Now, from digital wallets to the rise of QR codes, there's little doubt that contactless tech has certainly transformed our lives in recent years, perhaps especially during the global pandemic. But where does this rising tech go next? Here's Jim Stenman finding out.
An abundance of colors and eye-catching patterns. Having a manicure can be quite therapeutic for some, while others might see it as a form of self-expression.
Now, this may look like just another beauty salon, but it's so much more than that. Clients here are able to place a chip on their nail. The technology was introduced as a way to support social distancing, but it has significant potential, especially in a post-pandemic world.
Actually, after the corona situation, we have to encourage also the paperless. So we came up with this idea, and it's really doing well.
The technology behind the treatment is called near-field communication, or NFC, allowing digital devices and chips to communicate over short distances, which has already helped make Apple Pay, used by millions around the world, the success it is today. While Noor is the first UAE-based nail salon to experiment with the technology, essentially using it as a digital business card.
When the client she comes to us, we just ask her which information you want to install in this chip. Then nail technicians, they install this chip on her nail and cover it by any nail polish.
It's a gimmick, as we say right now, so it's the fun and the joys of trying something new.
And while chip nails are likely to remain niche, at least for now, interest in contactless sharing of data is on the rise, especially in the aviation industry.
Both airports and airlines in the industry have been significantly minimizing their expenses, but at the same time increasing the investments very specifically in contactless technologies. This type of technology will have quite some surprises for us in the years to come.
And while that may be the case, scientists at Carnegie Mellon University have recently managed to embed NFC technology into the surfaces of everyday objects, which could offer a glimpse into a future where this type of smart technology is simply part of our daily lives. Jim Stenman, CGTN, Dubai.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up on Global Business Africa, South Africa's socio-economic crisis has of course been sharply highlighted after the recent deadly unrest, which also led to widespread looting. Well, we'll be exploring if an emergency relief package can help to cushion the vulnerable population. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you.
Thank you so much, Uche. We'll see you then. Well, let's take a short break and return your sport news, including Egypt's saber fencing champion Mohamed Emmer targets a podium finish at the Tokyo 2020 Games.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Egypt's saber fencing men's team has its hopes set for a medal on current national